Picture the blinding lights of a professional basketball arena in the early 1990s. The roaring crowd, the squeaking sneakers on polished hardwood, and the multi-million-dollar television broadcasts. Right in the middle of this glittering universe stood Mookie Blaylock. He was not merely a forgotten bench player waiting for his turn. He was an elite defender, the face of a franchise, and a cultural icon whose very name radiated an effortless cool. According to the official archives of the National Basketball Association, Mookie Blaylock spent 13 remarkable seasons dominating the professional court, earning the respect of the greatest athletes on the planet. For over a decade, his life seemed like an unattainable dream to the millions watching from home. However, the glittering facade eventually cracked, revealing a devastating reality. Based on the public court records from Clayton County, Georgia, a judge eventually handed down a staggering sentence of 15 years behind bars for the former basketball star. In those official transcripts, the courtroom reporters noted how the once untouchable athlete stood completely broken as the verdict was read aloud. But what exactly led a celebrated millionaire to this point of no return? How does a man go from signing autographs to facing severe legal consequences? The media often paints a picture of sudden tragedy, but the clues were always there, hidden in plain sight. To truly understand how this idol lost everything, we have to rewind the tapes to a specific document signed in the summer of 1989, a contract that opened the door to a world of unimaginable and dangerous temptations. Before the bright lights of the big leagues, there was just a quiet kid from Garland, Texas. Mookie Blaylock possessed a raw, phenomenal talent that scouts recognized almost immediately, yet it was always accompanied by a strange, unsettling isolation. He rarely spoke to the press, preferring to let his aggressive play style do the talking. When he transitioned to the University of Oklahoma, that raw talent transformed into a terrifying force on the basketball court. According to the historical sports archives of the National Collegiate Athletic Association, in one single game in 1987, Blaylock recorded an astonishing 13 steals. That is a statistical anomaly that still leaves modern analysts completely baffled and searching for answers. Based on the scouting reports from that era, evaluators described his intuition on the court as almost predatory. He could read the opposing point guard's mind before they even made a move. By the time April of 1988 rolled around, the official broadcast logs show him leading his team all the way to the national championship final. In the university press releases from that spring, coaches praised his phenomenal work ethic, yet quietly whispered about his emotional distance from the rest of the roster. He was a lone wolf operating within a team sport. These contradictory reports created a complex profile for the young star. The talent was undeniable, but his personality was a locked vault. Would his introverted nature survive the crushing pressure of professional sports? That incredible defensive statistic, those 13 steals in a single night, forced professional managers to completely ignore his complicated character as they approached the most important day of his young career. The professional draft is always a high-stakes gamble, a night where franchises risk their entire future on the shoulders of 20-year-old kids. The atmosphere in the green room was thick with anxiety, immense pressure, and the promise of generational wealth. For Mookie Blaylock, this was the ultimate moment of truth. According to the official transaction logs of the National Basketball Association, Mookie Blaylock was selected as the 12th overall pick in the first round of the 1989 draft by the New Jersey Nets. This was a massive investment by the franchise. Based on the financial disclosures published by sports agencies at the time, his rookie contract guaranteed him over $1 million, instantly catapulting the quiet Texas native into a completely different stratosphere of wealth and public scrutiny. Stepping onto the professional hardwood for the first time, the speed and physicality of the league were overwhelming, but Blaylock quickly adapted. He aggressively carved out a reputation as a relentless defender, a guard dog who would terrorize anyone holding the ball. In the post-game locker room interviews captured by local television networks, veteran players openly admitted they hated playing against him. He was relentless, physical, and absolutely fearless. Yet, while his bank account grew and his reputation solidified, a unique cultural phenomenon was quietly brewing far away from the basketball courts of New Jersey. Nobody could have predicted that his ultimate claim to worldwide fame would not happen during a nationally televised game. Instead, the real cultural explosion was about to occur inside a smoke-filled recording studio in Seattle in the late summer of 1991. Imagine the gritty, rainy streets of Seattle in the early 1990s. While Mookie Blaylock was battling on the polished courts of the East Coast, an underground musical revolution was brewing on the West Coast. A newly formed grunge band was desperately searching for an identity, and in a bizarre twist of fate, they decided to name themselves Mookie Blaylock. It sounds like an urban legend, but according to the published music catalogs and industry magazines of the era, the band actually played their earliest shows under the name of the professional basketball player. But why would a group of Seattle musicians become obsessed with a New Jersey point guard? The answer is hidden in the details. Based on the transcriptions of later interviews given by the frontman, Eddie Vedder, the band was fascinated by his unique name and relentless energy. They eventually had to change their moniker due to trademark concerns, becoming the legendary group Pearl Jam. However, they left a permanent, hidden tribute to the athlete. According to the official sales records and Billboard charts, the band released their monumental debut album in August of 1991. They titled this masterpiece 10. According to the press clippings from that month, fans speculated endlessly about the meaning of the title, until the band confirmed it was a direct reference to the jersey number 10, worn by Mookie Blaylock himself. This connection made his name immortal in pop culture, cementing his status as a true icon of the decade. This strange tribute from the rock world should have solidified his position as an untouchable franchise star. Yet, the business of professional sports is ruthless, and just 1 year later, the front office would make a highly cynical and financially motivated decision that changed the trajectory of his entire life in November of 1992. Behind the closed doors of executive suites, professional basketball is a cold, calculating business. Despite Mookie Blaylock's rising cultural fame and aggressive defensive statistics, the executives in New Jersey began to view him as a trade asset rather than a cornerstone. Rumors began to circulate in the sports sections of major newspapers about behind-the-scenes conflicts and management disputes. According to the official transaction documents filed with the league office, an explosive trade was finalized in November of 1992, officially sending Mookie Blaylock to the Atlanta Hawks. The press of that month portrayed the move as a desperate shakeup, but for Blaylock, it was an unexpected salvation. When he arrived in Atlanta, he did not just join a new team. He found a home that completely embraced his unique style. The coaching staff in Georgia recognized his predatory instincts and handed him the keys to the offense. Based on the statistical breakdowns published by the league at the end of that season, Mookie Blaylock averaged over 30 minutes of playing time per game during his debut year with the Hawks. This was an unprecedented level of trust. In the post-game locker room reports, veteran sports journalists noted how his confidence surged, completely transforming the dynamic of the entire franchise. He was no longer just a defensive specialist. He was the undisputed floor general. The front office gave him absolute freedom, and this freedom pushed him to an unreachable level of performance. setting the perfect stage for a deeply prestigious honor that awaited him in February of 1994. Reaching the absolute pinnacle of professional sports is an honor reserved for a very select few. By his second season in Atlanta, the entire league was forced to acknowledge the undeniable dominance of Mookie Blaylock. He was no longer just a rising star, he was a confirmed elite force. The atmosphere inside the arenas shifted whenever he stepped onto the hardwood, with opposing guards showing visible hesitation. According to the official event protocols of the league, Mookie Blaylock made his debut at the highly coveted All-Star Game in February of 1994. Standing shoulder to shoulder with the greatest legends of the era, he proved that a quiet kid from Texas could command the brightest stage in the world. But the accolades did not stop at mere exhibition games. Based on the official voting records submitted by national sports journalists that same year, Blaylock was selected for the NBA All-Defensive First Team. In the reports of major sports media outlets, analysts highlighted how his defensive pressure simply dismantled opposing game plans. He was not just playing the game, he was scientifically dissecting it. Quotes from rival coaches, buried in old newspaper archives, reveal a sense of genuine frustration when trying to strategize against him. He was at the absolute peak of his physical and professional capabilities, idolized by fans and feared by opponents. However, this level of intense performance requires a massive toll on the human body and mind. Behind the facade of a flawless, smiling athlete lurked a growing personal issue, a heavy burden that coaches and managers chose to completely ignore as long as he kept delivering his historic, record-breaking defensive numbers during the subsequent 1996 season. Mookie Blaylock was not just a great player, he was a master thief on the professional basketball court. To truly comprehend his sheer dominance, we must look directly at the cold, hard numbers that defined his historical legacy. According to the historical sports archives of the league, during the 1996 to 1997 season, and again in the 1997 to 1998 season, Mookie Blaylock was the absolute leader in steals across the entire association. This was an era defined by brutal, physical contact, yet he managed to outsmart everyone on the floor. In the analytical reports published by major sports media at the time, experts extensively broke down his technique, noting that he averaged a staggering 2.7 steals per game during those consecutive peak years. In the detailed scouting reports of that era, rival coaches documented that playing against him was like playing against a man who could somehow see the future before it happened. But how did he maintain such terrifying physical intensity night after night against players much larger and stronger than him? This relentless, aggressive style demanded a massive, unseen sacrifice. The constant heavy collisions, the violent dives to the hardwood, the explosive lateral movements, it all compounded into agonizing physical trauma that the television cameras rarely captured. And right here arises the main question: what happens when an elite athlete can no longer endure the sheer physical agony using standard medical treatments and simple rest? Those incredible statistical records brought him legendary fame, millions of dollars, and absolute adoration. But they also forced his body to work far beyond its natural biological limits. This immense physical toll pushed him toward a highly dangerous reliance on powerful hidden substances just to survive the grueling, unforgiving schedule of the late 1990s. The evolution of Mookie Blaylock is a fascinating study in professional athletic survival. He clearly realized that depending solely on his physical defense was a recipe for a severely shortened career, so he completely reinvented his offensive arsenal. According to the internal club statistics of the Atlanta Hawks, He set a monumental franchise record by sinking 1,053-point shots during his incredible tenure with the team. He transformed into a lethal sniper, a player fully capable of changing the momentum of any game in a matter of seconds. In the official game protocols from the 1995 to 1996 season, it was meticulously recorded that he successfully made over 230 shots from beyond the arc. In the published transcripts of post-game press conferences, the coaching staff frequently praised his unmatched accuracy and his ability to deliver under extreme pressure. But why did a pure defensive specialist suddenly transform into a primary perimeter weapon? And what was the hidden psychological cost of this transformation? The pressure to carry the offensive load for an entire city was absolutely immense. As the crowds roared with deafening volume for every long-distance shot, the mental weight resting on the shoulders of Mookie Blaylock only intensified. He was the hero they demanded, performing flawlessly under the brightest lights night after night. Yet, those closely associated with the team started noticing a deeply disturbing contrast. While tens of thousands of fans passionately chanted his name in the arena, the reality away from the cameras was drastically and tragically different. The public witnessed his incredible marksmanship, remaining completely unaware that after the final buzzer sounded, he increasingly isolated himself from the world, locking away a dark, destructive secret that would soon bleed directly into the most private and protected sanctuary of the franchise. The locker room of a professional sports organization is a tightly guarded fortress, a sacred place where personal flaws and damaging secrets are usually buried deep to protect the corporate brand. However, by the late 1990s, the unsettling whispers surrounding Mookie Blaylock became absolutely impossible to ignore or contain. According to the testimonies of veteran sports reporters covering Atlanta during that specific period, the front office quietly handed down multiple financial fines to the star point guard for repeatedly showing up late to mandatory team practices and meetings. These were not simple, innocent oversights. They were blaring alarm bells. In the published memoirs of several league insiders, there were alarming, highly detailed reports describing his increasingly erratic behavior off the hardwood, including a persistent, undeniable smell of alcohol during morning shoot-arounds. In the confidential internal documents of the franchise, team executives allegedly noted his growing, profound isolation from the rest of the roster. But why did the powerful league and the wealthy club choose to turn a blind eye for so long, effectively enabling this downward spiral? In the high-stakes culture of 1990s professional basketball, as long as a star player delivered crucial victories and generated massive revenue, their personal demons were routinely swept under the rug. The franchise aggressively protected their financial investment, creating a highly dangerous bubble around him. They desperately hoped the problem would just magically resolve itself behind closed doors. Instead, the severe dependency tightened its merciless grip, radically transforming his behavior and poisoning his relationships with longtime teammates. The organization tried everything to suppress the growing internal scandals, but their patience was rapidly running out. In May of 1999, the management finally reached an absolute breaking point, officially drafting a set of fatal transaction documents that would permanently exile their greatest star. In the ruthless world of professional athletics, loyalty has a very strict expiration date. For the Atlanta Hawks, that date arrived when the whispers about their star guard became too loud to ignore. The front office had covered up his struggles for years, but as his physical condition deteriorated and his locker room isolation grew, a cold business decision was made. According to the official transaction documents filed with the league in May of 1999, Mookie Blaylock was abruptly traded to the Golden State Warriors. This was not a mutually agreed-upon departure. It was an exile. The media at the time framed it as a strategic rebuild, but the underlying truth was much darker. In the published transaction reports from major sports networks, analysts noted a sudden, precipitous decline in his on-court production that could no longer be hidden. But why did a player known for his relentless energy suddenly look so visibly exhausted on the court? The move to the West Coast was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to rejuvenate his career under the California sun. Instead, it became a slow, agonizing descent. According to the official league statistics, by the time the 2001 season rolled around, his scoring average had plummeted drastically, falling well below 10 points per game. This dramatic drop was unprecedented for a man who had recently been a franchise cornerstone. In the post-game summaries written by local beat reporters, journalists frequently described him as a shadow of his former self, a veteran completely stripped of his signature defensive ferocity. The bright California sun did not cure his hidden ailments. It merely exposed the deep structural cracks in his life. This heartbreaking statistical collapse was just a preview of the absolute darkness that was waiting for him as his final professional season approached in 2002. Watching a once great athletic idol slowly lose his powers is a profoundly tragic spectacle. During his tenure with the Golden State Warriors, Mookie Blaylock was pushed into the role of a veteran mentor, a position that never suited his fiercely quiet and solitary nature. According to the official league roster records, the 2001 to 2002 season would ultimately serve as the final chapter of his professional career. The fire that once intimidated the greatest players in the world was completely extinguished. In the detailed analytical breakdowns of his playing time during that final stretch, statisticians recorded a massive, undeniable reduction in his minutes over his final 35 games on the court. But why would a coach bench a former All-Star with such a rich, prestigious resume? The answer was painfully obvious to anyone paying close attention. In the published memoirs of his contemporaries, former teammates described a man who looked completely disengaged, his eyes vacant, and his passion for the sport entirely drained. The relentless physical grind and the secret consuming dependency had finally broken his spirit. The fans sitting in the stands could not understand why the legendary guard was now spending most of his time silently watching from the sidelines. According to the medical transcripts leaked years later, the sheer physical pain from a decade of diving on hardwood floors was becoming completely unbearable without heavy, dangerous self-medication. When he finally walked away from the professional hardwood in the spring of 2002, there was no massive farewell tour or grand ceremony. He just quietly disappeared from the locker room. However, the absolute loss of that strict daily team schedule swung the doors wide open for a catastrophic downward spiral. What exactly happens to an elite gladiator when the cheering stops, the stadium lights shut off, and they are left entirely alone with an overflowing bank account and zero daily obligations? For Mookie Blaylock, retirement was not a peaceful retreat. It was a terrifying freefall into a massive psychological void. According to the financial summaries published by the Players Association, he received the final massive payouts from his last professional contract in the early 2000s, leaving him with millions of dollars but absolutely no structural purpose. In numerous public interviews given by retired athletes, the first year away from the sport is often described as the most dangerous period of their lives, a time when the sudden lack of adrenaline forces them to seek dangerous substitutes. But how does a man who spent his entire life adhering to a strict, minute-by-minute athletic schedule cope with endless, unstructured time? The answer, tragically, was found at the bottom of a bottle. Blaylock sank deeply into severe alcohol dependency, using it as a desperate tool to numb the lingering physical agony of his playing days and the crushing silence of his sprawling mansion. In the investigative reports compiled by local media years after the fact, journalists noted how the former star completely vanished from public life, isolating himself from former colleagues and friends. The wealth that was supposed to guarantee a comfortable, luxurious future instead financed his rapid, uncontrolled descent. This devastating isolation and dependency inevitably pushed him behind the wheel of his luxury vehicles in an altered state, and soon enough, the flashing lights of police cruisers began to permanently replace the flashbulbs of sports photographers. When a person of immense wealth and local fame begins to spiral, the justice system often handles them with silken gloves rather than iron handcuffs. For Mookie Blaylock, his quiet retirement years in the suburbs of Atlanta quickly transformed into a deeply alarming police blotter. The general public was completely unaware, but the local authorities were constantly dealing with the dangerous fallout of his hidden dependency. According to the official law enforcement databases of the state of Georgia, there was a shocking statistic recorded under his name. He had faced at least 7 separate arrests for driving under the influence before the year 2013. In the published arrest reports, patrol officers frequently noted his severely disoriented state and complete inability to perform basic field sobriety tests. Yet he consistently walked away with minimal consequences. But why did the local county courts continue to issue such lenient, almost forgiving sentences to a man who was clearly and repeatedly endangering public safety? His former status as an untouchable sports icon seemed to act as an invisible protective shield against any severe legal penalties. This constant leniency only fueled a highly dangerous sense of absolute invincibility. He began to operate under the assumption that the fundamental rules of the road simply did not apply to him anymore. According to the public records of the county court system, an active legal warrant for his arrest was eventually issued because he simply failed to appear for a scheduled mandatory hearing regarding his ongoing substance and traffic charges. How could a highly recognizable millionaire simply ignore a strict judicial summons without facing immediate consequences? The legal system gave him chance after chance, endlessly hoping he would voluntarily correct his destructive course. Unfortunately, while the judges and prosecutors were busy showing incredible mercy, his own biological system was quietly preparing to hand down a much more terrifying and immediate sentence. The human body can only endure so much chemical abuse before the internal circuitry begins to completely misfire. While the local police departments were busy tracking his escalating traffic violations, a much more sinister and invisible threat was rapidly developing deep within Mookie Blaylock's neurological system. The countless years of heavy dependency, combined with the extreme physical trauma of his athletic career, had severely damaged his body. This toxic combination led to frightening, unpredictable physical episodes that he desperately tried to keep hidden from the public eye. According to the highly sensitive medical documents later presented by his defense team in open court, Blaylock had been suffering from severe, incapacitating seizures for an extended period. In the transcribed testimonies of his treating physicians during subsequent legal hearings, medical experts explicitly confirmed that these sudden, violent blackouts were a direct biological consequence of his long-term substance struggles. But how could a man suffering from random, paralyzing neurological episodes even possess the keys to a motor vehicle? This is precisely where the narrative shifts from a sad story of personal dependency to a chilling case of undeniable reckless negligence. According to the official medical records read aloud in the courtroom, his doctors had issued a strict, unequivocal directive that completely forbade him from operating any type of machinery or vehicle due to the immense risk of a sudden, uncontrollable seizure. He was fully and legally aware of his highly unstable condition. Yet, why did he deliberately choose to ignore the desperate, documented warnings of specialized medical professionals? The heavy, intoxicating fog of dependency often completely obscures rational judgment and basic human empathy. Blatantly ignoring that strict medical prohibition, on one very warm afternoon in late May, he made the catastrophic decision to grab the keys to his massive luxury sport utility vehicle and start the engine. Certain dates become permanently etched into history, not for moments of triumph, but for instances of irreversible tragedy. The spring of 2013 felt completely ordinary in the quiet suburban neighborhoods of Jonesboro, Georgia. However, a catastrophic chain of events had already been set into motion the exact moment Mookie Blaylock walked out of his front door. According to the official accident reconstruction protocols filed by the local police department, the specific date was the 31st of May, 2013. On that fateful afternoon, Blaylock climbed into the driver's seat of his heavy Cadillac Escalade. What was his intended destination, and why was he driving when he knew his medical condition was a literal ticking time bomb? In the published law enforcement databases reviewed by investigative journalists, it was revealed that on that exact day, there was an active, outstanding warrant for his arrest, originating from neighboring Spalding County. He was a wealthy former superstar navigating the local roads as an active fugitive from justice. But did the intense anxiety of that outstanding warrant trigger his reckless behavior, or was his judgment completely impaired by substances before he even turned the ignition key? The exact mental state he was in as he navigated the local traffic remains a subject of intense legal debate. As he drove through the busy commercial zones, the heavy vehicle essentially became an unguided missile. According to the precise timeline established in the precinct reports, his massive luxury SUV began to aggressively accelerate as it crossed over the median on Tara Boulevard. Within a matter of mere seconds, the relentless forward momentum of that heavy machine would ensure that time stopped completely for an innocent family traveling directly in his destructive path. The physical reality of a high-speed automotive collision is a chaotic, terrifying explosion of metal and glass. On that warm afternoon, the busy lanes of Tara Boulevard transformed from a typical suburban route into a scene of unimaginable devastation. According to the emergency dispatch logs recorded by the local 911 operators, the frantic calls began pouring in right around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The initial reports described a massive, horrifying head-on collision that completely shut down the highway. Based on the official accident reconstruction files completed by the Traffic Division, Mookie Blaylock's heavy Cadillac Escalade abruptly crossed over the center median, directly entering the fast-moving lanes of oncoming traffic. The sheer kinetic energy of the heavy luxury vehicle was absolutely devastating. In the preliminary statements given by eyewitnesses on the scene, people described hearing a deafening crash, followed by total, eerie silence before the emergency sirens began to wail. First responders rushed to the chaotic wreckage, confronted by a horrifying scene of crushed steel and deployed airbags. It was a terrifying nightmare playing out in broad daylight. But as the paramedics desperately worked to pull individuals from the severely mangled vehicles, the grim reality of the situation began to set in. One vehicle belonged to a former millionaire athlete experiencing a sudden, catastrophic medical crisis, but the other vehicle was a simple family minivan, occupying the absolute wrong place at the absolute wrong time. While the rescue workers frantically tried to stabilize the former basketball star, who was completely unresponsive, they simultaneously realized that the situation in the crushed minivan was far more critical. leading to a discovery that would shock the entire community. When the initial news broke on the national sports networks, the headlines focused entirely on the severe injuries sustained by a former professional basketball star. It was framed as a tragic accident involving a famous athlete. However, the real devastating human cost of this collision was completely ignored in those early television bulletins. The vehicle that the heavy Cadillac struck head-on was occupied by Frankie and Monica Murphy. According to the heartbreaking public statements released by the family, Monica was a 43-year-old mother who was simply running daily errands with her husband. Based on the official announcements from the Atlanta Medical Center in late May of 2013, she tragically passed away from the catastrophic internal trauma sustained during the violent impact. In the numerous obituaries published in the local newspapers, her loved ones described her as the deeply loving, irreplaceable center of a large household. The most devastating fact, heavily documented in the local press, was that she left behind 5 grieving children, who would now have to navigate the rest of their lives without their mother. How does a family ever recover from such a sudden, senseless, and completely preventable tragedy? The sports world was busy sending prayers to a man who had squandered millions and ignored strict medical advice, while a completely innocent family was forced to plan a funeral. The stark, sickening contrast between the famous athlete and the quiet, everyday victims caused a massive wave of public outrage once the full details emerged. For Mookie Blaylock, who was currently lying completely unconscious in an intensive care unit attached to life support machines, the biological clock of his recovery had started, but a much darker legal clock was ticking loudly just outside the doors of his hospital room. Inside the quiet, sterile environment of the intensive care unit, the situation was extremely critical. Mookie Blaylock was attached to numerous artificial breathing machines, with doctors offering highly uncertain prognoses about his chances of survival. According to the medical summaries briefly shared with the press, the former athlete spent several agonizing days entirely dependent on external life support systems. However, the atmosphere surrounding his hospital bed was anything but a peaceful vigil. While medical professionals fought to stabilize his vital signs, severe legal machinery was rapidly assembling right down the hallway. Detectives were meticulously gathering physical evidence from the crushed vehicles and pulling his extensive, troubling medical and legal history. Based on the official press releases issued by the Jonesboro Police Department shortly after the incident, investigators officially prepared major criminal charges, including a deeply serious count related to the unintentional loss of life involving a motor vehicle. They had 2 distinct investigative theories to pursue. The first possibility was that a documented sudden medical seizure caused the catastrophic loss of control. The alternative possibility pointed directly to his incredibly long, heavily documented history of severe substance dependency and reckless driving. Either way, the invisible shield of his former athletic fame was completely shattered. As soon as the doctors finally removed the breathing tubes and he was able to draw air on his own, he did not just face a long, painful physical rehabilitation. He had to look directly into the eyes of local investigators who coldly presented him with a set of legal documents outlining a terrifying number of years he might spend locked inside a state penitentiary. The aftermath of a fatal collision is not just measured in physical wreckage. It is measured in the agonizingly slow grinding of the judicial system. For over a year, Mookie Blaylock existed in a torturous legal limbo, out on bond but entirely trapped by his impending trial. According to the official judicial calendar of Clayton County, the final legal proceedings were officially set to commence in October of 2014. During this grueling waiting period, 2 completely contrasting narratives were aggressively built behind closed doors. Based on the public filings submitted by his defense attorney, the primary argument rested heavily on the sudden, catastrophic medical seizure that allegedly caused him to completely black out behind the wheel. They painted a picture of an uncontrollable biological tragedy. However, the prosecution was constructing a devastating counter-narrative. In the preliminary hearing transcripts, the district attorney pointed directly to his extensive, undeniable history of severe substance dependency and those explicit, documented warnings from medical professionals prohibiting him from driving. They argued that his decision to start the engine that day was an act of extreme criminal negligence. While these high-stakes legal strategies were being fiercely debated, the reaction from the professional basketball community was absolutely deafening in its silence. The franchise he once elevated and the colleagues he once played beside offered almost zero public support. He was completely isolated, facing a terrifying reality entirely alone. A profound, heavy silence settled over the courtroom as the prosecutor finally laid a stack of documents on the table. Documents that contained a highly controversial agreement that would permanently seal his fate. Trials involving high-profile figures often promise explosive courtroom drama, but the absolute fear of spending the rest of one's natural life inside a concrete cell usually forces a much quieter resolution. As the trial date finally arrived, Mookie Blaylock was forced to confront the overwhelming, undeniable weight of the evidence stacked against him. According to the official court transcripts, dated the 27th of October, 2014, the former athletic superstar made the agonizing decision to accept a formal plea agreement. By officially admitting his guilt to the severe charges, including vehicular homicide, he effectively avoided a potential life sentence. The atmosphere inside the courtroom that day was incredibly heavy and deeply emotional. Based on the reports from journalists seated in the gallery, Blaylock, looking completely diminished and broken, stood before the judge and offered a tearful, desperate apology directly to the grieving Murphy family. He openly acknowledged the irreparable damage his actions had caused. In the final sentencing documents signed by the presiding judge, the highly structured punishment was explicitly detailed. He received a staggering overall sentence of 15 years. However, the specific terms dictated that he would serve 3 years in a state penitentiary, with the remaining 12 years to be served under strict, supervised probation. It was a monumental fall from grace. The heavy iron doors of a state correctional facility slammed shut behind a man who used to command the roaring applause of 20,000 adoring fans. Yet, the complex legal twists of this tragic saga were not completely over, as a sudden judicial review would soon dramatically alter the timeline of his confinement. Transitioning from sprawling luxury mansions and five-star hotels to the brutal, unforgiving reality of the Georgia penal system is a psychological shock that very few can truly comprehend. Stripped of his fame, his immense wealth, and his freedom, Mookie Blaylock became just another numbered inmate wearing a standard-issue uniform. The daily routine was strictly dictated by harsh sirens and heavy steel locks, a terrifying contrast to the glamorous life he had built on the professional courts. But his legal nightmare was about to take another severe, unexpected turn. According to the updated legal databases maintained by the Department of Corrections, his initial sentence underwent a significant and highly controversial modification. While the original plea agreement mandated 3 years of actual confinement, subsequent court rulings dramatically extended his time behind bars. Based on the legal addendums filed by the presiding judge, due to complex violations regarding the strict terms of his plea and probation arrangements, his mandatory time inside the state facility was suddenly increased to a full 7 years. This extended sentence meant that he would spend the remainder of his middle age completely isolated from society. forced to reflect every single day on the tragic choice he made on that fateful May afternoon. The prison environment has a way of completely erasing a person's past achievements, reducing them entirely to their current crimes. While the correctional system processed his extended time, the broader cultural world began to silently and systematically erase his legacy, leaving behind a highly uncomfortable question for the multi-billion-dollar sports industry that originally created him. The professional sports machine is incredibly efficient at building towering idols, but it is equally ruthless at erasing them when their personal demons become a public liability. The tragic saga of Mookie Blaylock serves as a devastating, cautionary tale about what happens when an elite gladiator is stripped of their armor and left entirely alone to navigate the agonizing physical and mental aftermath of a brutal career. If you search the historical archives of the National Basketball Association today, the numbers still tell the story of a defensive genius. According to the official lifetime statistics of the league, he still firmly holds the 11th position in the entire history of the sport for the total number of career steals. It is a monumental athletic achievement that should guarantee eternal celebration. However, based on a comprehensive review of the official franchise tributes, anniversary celebrations, and league promotional materials produced over the last decade, his name has been completely and systematically scrubbed from the institutional memory. There are no highlight reels, no nostalgic documentaries, and absolutely no retired jerseys hanging in the rafters. His incredible sporting legacy has been entirely overshadowed by the heavy, tragic reality of the police reports and judicial verdicts from Clayton County. He is remembered not for the games he won, but for the innocent life that was lost on Tara Boulevard due to his reckless actions. The story of Mookie Blaylock leaves us with a haunting realization about the dark side of fame. It proves that no amount of money, cultural status, or athletic brilliance can ever protect a person from the devastating, irreversible consequences of their own hidden choices.